Florida's reputation versus reality. Florida, the Sunshine State. Palm trees, beaches, Disney World, and guns. Lots of guns. For decades, Florida has carried the nickname the Gunshine State. To outsiders, that label suggests wide-open freedom, where the Second Amendment isn't just protected, it's celebrated. A place where gun owners enjoy rights as bright and bold as the Florida sun itself. But here's the reality. That reputation is only half true. Florida has indeed been a pioneer in expanding gun rights, setting national trends and inspiring other states. Yet at the same time, it's also been a frustrating example of unfinished freedom, moving 2 steps forward, then stopping short. This tension runs deep. On one hand, Florida was one of the first states to normalize concealed carry back in the 1980s, a decision that rippled across America and changed the way we view self-defense. On the other hand, even today, the state still bans open carry, something that feels contradictory to many gun owners who thought the Gunshine State meant full recognition of their rights. So before we dive into laws, battles, and politics, let's pause and ask, how did Florida earn its gun-friendly reputation, and why does it still hold back when it comes to open carry? The birth of the Gunshine State, 1987. To understand why Florida carries such a strong gun culture today, we need to roll the clock back to 1987. That year, Florida passed a sweeping concealed carry law that forever changed the national conversation. Before then, most Americans lived in states where carrying a handgun required showing good cause or convincing the local sheriff that you really needed one. It was a patchwork of maybes, favors, and endless bureaucracy. Florida broke that mold. With the stroke of a pen, lawmakers created a shall-issue system, meaning if you met the basic requirements, the state had to give you a permit. No special favors, no arbitrary denials. Just apply, qualify, and carry. At the time, critics predicted chaos. They warned of shootouts on highways, bar fights turning into bloodbaths, and crime spiraling out of control. Headlines screamed about Wild West Florida. But the apocalypse never came. In fact, violent crime rates didn't explode, and the policy became a model. Other states watched closely. Within a decade, the majority of the country had adopted some version of Florida's system. That's why 1987 is remembered as the year Florida truly earned the nickname the Gunshine State. But here's the catch. While Florida was leading the charge on concealed carry, it quietly slammed the door shut on open carry. In the very same legislative session that made permits widely available, lawmakers also banned Floridians from wearing a sidearm openly in public. The compromise was intentional. Give people the right to carry, but only if they kept it hidden. That trade-off has haunted the state ever since. Florida set the standard for concealed carry, but it also locked itself into a rule that many gun owners still see as backwards. And the debate over that compromise hasn't gone away. It's only gotten louder. The 2023 breakthrough, HB 543, and permitless carry. Fast forward more than 3 decades after 1987, and Florida gun owners were still living with the consequences of that old compromise. Concealed carry was widespread, yes, but it came with paperwork, classes, fees, and the constant reminder that open carry was still off-limits. Then came 2023. Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law HB 543, a bill that made permitless concealed carry the rule of the land starting on July 1st. Overnight, Florida became the 26th state in America to drop the licensing requirement for carrying a concealed firearm. On paper, it looked like a landmark win. For years, Floridians had complained about the hoops they had to jump through just to exercise a right that was already protected by the Constitution. $100 in fees, a mandatory class that many said did little more than check a bureaucratic box, fingerprints like you were applying for a federal job, and weeks of waiting for a laminated card to arrive in the mail. HB 543 ripped that entire process out of the equation. No more begging for a permission slip, no more wallet card. From July 1st onward, if you were legally allowed to own a gun, you could carry it concealed. No permit required. For many Floridians, it felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. Gun rights groups celebrated. At rallies and online forums, people compared it to joining their neighbors in Alabama and Georgia, states where permitless carry was already the norm. For once, Florida didn't feel like it was lagging behind. It felt like it was catching up. But as the celebrations died down, the limits of HB 543 became painfully clear. The law didn't change the rules for purchasing a firearm. You still had to be 21 to buy one. Background checks were still required at licensed dealers. Waiting periods didn't vanish. And most importantly, it did nothing to touch the ban on open carry. That's where frustration set in, because while Florida was patting itself on the back for joining the Constitutional Carry Club, gun owners knew it was only half true. Yes, you could now tuck a pistol under your shirt without asking for government permission. But if you dared wear that same pistol openly in a holster at the gas station, you were breaking the law. It created a strange contradiction. Concealed carry was finally free, but open carry was still a crime. That gap between the victory on paper and the reality on the ground is why many Floridians saw HB 543 not as the final chapter, but as the opening round in the next battle. The legal battles and failed attempts at open carry. If HB 543 was supposed to be the finish line, history quickly reminded Floridians that the fight over open carry was far from over. In fact, the courtroom and the legislature have long been the battlegrounds where this issue keeps hitting a wall. Take Norman v. State 2016, for example. Dale Norman, a licensed concealed carry holder, was arrested in Fort Pierce after his handgun became visible while he walked down the street. He argued that Florida's ban on open carry violated the Second Amendment. The case went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, and in a narrow 4-2 decision, the justices upheld the state's ban. The ruling was clear. Florida's open carry prohibition was constitutional. To many, that decision slammed the door shut on hopes of expanding freedom. But the courts weren't the only roadblock. The legislature tried, and failed, multiple times to push open carry forward. In 2011, 2016, and again in 2017, bills were introduced that would have allowed licensed individuals to carry openly. Every time, the measures either stalled in committee or were shot down by strong opposition from law enforcement groups, tourism advocates, and even some legislators within the Republican majority. Critics painted a grim picture. They warned that open carry could spook millions of tourists, the lifeblood of Florida's economy, turning family vacations into anxious getaways. They argued it could damage the state's carefully polished image as a sun-soaked paradise of beaches, resorts, and theme parks. Law enforcement leaders piled on too, saying open carry could escalate encounters with officers, create confusion in high-stress situations, and even embolden criminals to blend in more easily. Supporters, on the other hand, fired back with a straightforward question. If a person can legally carry a firearm concealed under a t-shirt, why should the exact same gun in a visible holster be criminal? The background check doesn't change. The owner's record doesn't change. The legality of the weapon doesn't change. The only difference is whether the pistol is tucked under fabric or riding on the belt. To many gun owners, that wasn't public safety. It was political theater. And so, the cycle continued. Bills were filed, debates flared, lobbyists dug in, and then, just like clockwork, those efforts collapsed in committee or quietly died on the floor. Each time, frustration in the gun community deepened, as if Florida was stuck in a holding pattern, forever circling the runway of open carry, but never cleared to land. By the time HB 543 arrived in 2023, this long trail of failed attempts wasn't forgotten. It was the backdrop. For many Floridians, the new law felt less like a breakthrough and more like déjà vu. A familiar story. Celebrate a win, but leave the other half of freedom locked behind closed doors. The present tension and the future question. So here we are. Florida in 2023 and beyond, caught between its reputation and its reality. Permitless concealed carry is now the law of the land, a victory that millions celebrated, but for many, it still feels like a half measure, a freedom that comes with an asterisk. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. You can carry a firearm under your shirt without ever asking permission, but wear that same pistol openly on your hip at a gas station and you're suddenly a criminal. That's not a loophole, it's a fault line running straight through Florida's identity as the Gunshine State. Legal battles continue to loom in the background. Red flag laws remain untouched. The ban on open carry still stands firm, backed by powerful lobbying groups and politicians who fear the optics of visible firearms more than they fear restricting constitutional rights. And every legislative session, the same cycle repeats. A new open carry bill sparks headlines, stirs heated debates, and then dies quietly, leaving supporters with nothing but frustration. Meanwhile, gun owners are watching. They've seen Georgia, Alabama, and dozens of other states embrace full constitutional carry, both open and concealed. They've read the Supreme Court's Bruin decision, which slapped down may-issue permitting schemes as unconstitutional. And they can't help but wonder, if the Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms, how much longer can Florida justify banning open carry altogether? This is the tension that defines the moment. Florida wants the brand of freedom, the slogan of liberty, the nickname of Gunshine State. But will it live up to it? Or will it stay stuck in halfway measures, giving its citizens just enough to celebrate, but never the full plate? And that leaves us with the question that echoes louder every year. Will Florida ever finish the job and embrace true constitutional carry? Or will it keep playing pretend with its own reputation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them and jumping into the discussion with you. If you found this breakdown useful, give the video a thumbs up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive on gun laws and Second Amendment battles across America. And hey, share this video with a friend who still thinks Florida is the most gun-friendly state in the country. You might surprise them. Stay sharp, stay free, and as always, thanks for watching.